It's a people, it's a community, it's a life, it's a heart, it's a spirit.
Question: the heck would you want a picture of a tattoo of $1,000 on your penis for?
What makes this book so relevant, even though it was written over 100 years ago, is that it's about terrorism.
The work, sex, cars, bars, broads.
And with children, it's building on what they have. They have great imagination.
Dementia is not a diagnosis. It's a set of symptoms.
And he kept explaining to me that I wasn't gay. You cannot be gay. You just cannot.
The main thing is to be open and honest and be, true to yourself.
Hello and welcome to Talking About. Tonight my guest is a poet and author, Jackie Sheeler. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me.
Oh, glad to have you. Well, let's just dive right in. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Are you a native New Yorker?
I am such a native New Yorker. I was born in Brooklyn, lived in Queens for 10 years, in Staten Island for a couple of years, and now I'm living in Manhattan.
Okay. You grew up in Brooklyn. What was your family life like?
Well, very blue collar. My dad was a cop. He joined the police force, I think, the year I was born, or very shortly after. My mother was the proverbial housewife for at least the first few years, and then she went to beauty culture school, which is what they called it back then, and became a hairdresser. So,
were you very close with your parents?
That's such a tricky question.
Okay.
I love my parents, but I wouldn't characterize the family as having been close during that period of time.
So things were a little bumpy here and there?
Yeah. It was a turbulent household. There was a lot of love and a lot of activity and a lot of craziness, just all rolled into one. Both my parents have really dramatic personalities and strong ideas about how things, need to go. And actually, me and my two younger brothers were also born that way. So there was a whole lot of activity going on.
A lot of sparks.
Lots of sparks.
So, okay. Well, you mentioned that your father was a police officer. Were you influenced by a lot of police officer friends or your father's career at all?
Well, not only was my father a cop, I had an uncle that was a cop, and then some cousins. There was a lot of police on my father's side of the family, and police tend to hang out together. Actually, the apartment we moved to when I was 8, the landlord was my father's partner's mother, owned the house that we lived in. So it was very much, there was a lot of cop culture around.
Okay, so all part of the grand spider web. Everything connects just a few inches away from another strand.
And it's an interesting thing, it's. If you're a kid in Brooklyn, your dad's a cop. That's a little bit of a badge. It's an interesting thing. It's like a fact you bring to show and tell, to tell people about. And everyone thinks like, wow, your dad's a cop. You must know stuff that other people don't know. And maybe that's a little bit true. I mean, it's true that there are guns in the house, and you get used to seeing guns, and that certainly was less typical when I was growing up than it may be now. Unfortunately, guns have become pretty commonplace in New York City. But one interesting thing, and my father's been retired for a number of years now, so I can say this. One thing that he would always do that was a big hit in the neighborhood is he'd make sure that he worked on the 4th of July. And him and his partner would go trolling the neighborhood and collecting all the fireworks and bringing them right back to us. So my block was always the most well-equipped on the 4th of July with fireworks and all kinds of colorful material. He wouldn't give us the M80s. The really dangerous stuff would go back to the station house, but we'd get all the Roman candles and the bottle rockets and stuff. Now, there's other things that come home with a cop that are less pleasant, that are fringe benefits that aren't exactly benefits. There's a lot of violence on that job, and it certainly was, I think, more so then than now, because it's a little more controlled now. It's a little more public. There's a little more scrutiny. But then, really, cops did, and to a great extent had to, manage the streets they controlled through physical needs. The kids hanging out on the corner, it wasn't so much you take them in and write them up or they would do a night in Spofford or everything being really politically correct. The cops would go and break their heads, and then the kids wouldn't be there the next day. And they felt, in a way, and probably this is true, they're doing a good deed in that context. The kid's not going to jail, the kid's not getting a record, the kid's learning a lesson, maybe they'll straighten up and fly right. But when that's a way of handling things, it becomes a way of handling things, even when it's ineffective, even when it's inappropriate, and that often comes home. So there was a lot of violence in my childhood home.
Okay. Well, there comes a time in a lot of young people's lives where they tend to rebel against what their parents stand for. Did you ever hit that kind of point?
Oh, yeah. I guess I was born wanting reasons for everything, and if you couldn't tell me why, I wouldn't go along with it. And then also, I'm the type of a personality, I'm a very fair person. And I guess I can articulate this now. As a child, I acted it out, and I couldn't have articulated or even understood where it was coming from, but I really want to be treated fairly, and when I'm not, I don't respond well, and never have. So there was a lot of conflict. If I was given an arbitrary rule, and I was a good kid. I was a good kid in school. I came home with good grades. I mostly behaved. And even in the context of that, I was often punished for, let's say, minor offenses, pretty minor things, which really maybe were born more out of my father having had too much to drink on a particular night, or him having had a big argument with my mother. He would never put his hands on my mother, but that could sometimes trickle over, and then the kids were kind of the moving targets in the house. And when that kind of stuff happened, it was almost no holds barred for me. So I did start to rebel, and as a teenager, became totally wild, act out. Then I started to really deserve everything I got, because I had pretty much...
you mentioned acting out. I mean, acting out in what manner?
Street gang, dropped out of school at 14. Probably some other details that I won't mention on television, but I was the proverbial bad kid. From being the good kid, I skipped a grade in junior high. I was always with my face in the books. They used to refer to me as college material, because this was back in the day where kids didn't automatically go to college, and especially girls did.
Right.
I was born in '57, so the culture was different. So after all that, I just totally flipped and was on the other. I mean, I was out drinking and drugging all night long and hanging out with the most unsavory boyfriends. And coincidentally, my father's precinct was the 6-0 in Coney Island, and it just happened that I did most of my acting out right in Coney Island, joined the street gang that was prevalent there, and he was pretty public about my carrying on.
Okay, I mean, did you ever have any run-ins with the law throughout that?
Yeah, I had a few, and you'd get away with it because you'd mention the name and you'd show your ID, and so I wouldn't get arrested. Dad would take care of it. Maybe in some ways that was worse. Certainly seemed worse at the time. Now I'm grateful for not having juvenile record for a whole bunch of stuff. But
right, but it sounds like you were sort of proceeding down a spiral.
Yeah, I was. I'm not sure exactly what happened to turn that around for me. I had some really, really difficult years between 14 and 18, I would say. It was years of insanity. When I was 18, I think a light went on, and I saw how people in their 20s were living that had just continued in this trajectory, and it didn't seem like they were having any fun. So I kind of straightened up and made some amends, and my parents had split up by that time, and I went to live back with my father, which was a miracle. No one ever thought that would happen. And I got a straight job, and I was a receptionist at Merrill Lynch. I couldn't even imagine this a year before. And started to do some positive things for myself. And that lasted for a number of years. I didn't find the spiritual solution, though, at that point. I was really just kind of cooperating with society and trying to make it easier for myself. And I hadn't... Although I was searching, I lived with the Sufi order for a couple of years, and I was searching for something, but I hadn't found it, and I hadn't made peace with myself. So that all of these self-destructive tendencies came back in my mid-20s in a big way. And when I met the man who later became my husband, he had 20 or 25 years at that point of history with drug addiction, and I had been doing drugs from the time I was a teenager, but it was, party stuff, on again, off again. I would say if there was a drug I had a problem with at that point, it was alcohol. I would tend to drink too much and get stupid, and I knew that wasn't okay, but I didn't get seriously involved with any other drugs. But as soon as he and I got together, the drugs kind of really just took over the scene, and in almost no time at all, I found myself out of a job, and I had had a really good job at that time, and eventually out of an apartment, not having a place to live. We ended up on welfare, and just kind of became in a period of 3 years, it was just total devastation was wreaked. So, and it was interesting because I kind of thought I was invulnerable. Up until the point where I looked around and saw that the world was in a shambles, I thought it was his problem, and I was kind of going along for the ride or something. until suddenly one day I woke up and it wasn't his problem, it wasn't anybody's problem but mine, you know.
Was it a moment of clarity, or?
I know, right around then, this was in the late 80s, you know, you do enough drugs, the moment of clarity is just not, you know, going to happen. So I think it was more a moment of exhaustion. For me, the culmination was he had had enough. He just disappeared, and we were kind of, you know, we didn't have a place to stay. We were kind of living on the street, here, there, you know, catching a night here, whatever we could do. Had been that way for about a year, and he disappeared. I didn't know if he was dead, in jail. There's no way to find out either. It's not like he could write me a letter. I didn't have a place to get one, and certainly nobody had a cell phone. I mean, and I didn't know for a while what had happened to him. And I talked to my family. My father was very, very supportive. Now, as a police officer, he was already retired at this point, but I couldn't run any game on him. My mother, you know, I could put a little shade on it. Maybe she didn't have to know the extent. But my father, he knew exactly what was going on. It was had a lot of clarity as to just how bad things had gotten. And he discovered a treatment program and got me the phone numbers and told me what I had to do to get in. And I still had to take the appropriate actions. And it took a little bit of time. It took me about a month to get in. And I had done some little detoxes and whatnot up until then. But this was the first long-term program that I was really trying to get into. And he helped me, and I got in there. And, you know, at the time, you know, when my husband disappeared, which later he turned up in Florida, his mother had sent him a train ticket, and at like 50 years old, he went running home to Mom. So never did see him again after that, although we became, you know, we were phone friends. But I went into treatment, and I stayed there. So what I had thought was devastation, him disappearing, turned out to be the greatest gift. Because without that, I'm not sure, you know, I don't know if I would have had the muscle to take the steps that I needed to take. I don't think I would have left him on the street and gone and taken care of myself.
Right.
So it was great that responsibility and connection was taken away from me, so that I kind of saw no choice but to make things better. And that was in '89. Okay,
and you got into a program, and
I went into Samaritan Village, and it's actually a group that I'm still affiliated with. I go back and I teach writing workshops now, and I hold women's workshops, and I'm really still involved with the facility. I'm so grateful to be able to give something back to them after having gotten so much. I was a resident there for almost 2 years.
Okay, and we had done a program focusing specifically on Samaritan, and we learned a little bit about it, and refresh me, it's basically teaching people how to live their life from scratch?
Pretty much. You know, really, if you get involved in drugs to the point where it's taken over your whole life, which really is the point you have to be at before you'll go into a TC, you need to start from scratch, because it's not about a lecture, and it's not about information. It's about going through the routines of daily life in a positive way without the substance, learning how to do that again, getting back in the habit of taking a daily shower and eating, you know, at regular times, which seems like really basic stuff. It's not basic if you've been living in the street and ripping and running and in and out of jail and everything else. It's just nothing. There is no normal life. There's no line to get back to. You've lost all that. And that's what they give you in a treatment program. They also break down your attitude. You might come in there a little bit cocky. You're not going to be cocky if you stay. You know, it's like your best thinking got you here, and look where you are. Right. Look around. Shut up. Do what we're telling you to do. And I didn't think I'd stay when I went there. It was funny. I was in a treatment program, and so I kept waiting for them to come and give me my treatment. And that wasn't happening. I was getting mops to mop the floor, and, you know, I was put on kitchen duty, and, you know, I was given all these responsibilities, and I kept thinking, I felt too embarrassed to ask anybody, but I kept thinking, well, when is it that I'm going to get my treatment? It took a while for it to dawn on me that that's exactly what I was getting by following rules and learning how to interact with I think there were 75 people in the house at the time that I was there. They've reduced the population a little bit in that particular facility now. But I didn't think that I would stay. I thought it was like a lunatic asylum, and in some ways I guess it was, and that's exactly where I belonged during that period of my life. So I stayed. I stayed 14 months in main treatment, and then 7 months in what they call re-entry, or 8 months actually.
Was your writing with you through all that?
My writing returned to me there, and I have to say, Howard Ostwind, if you are listening to this show, thank you. He was a social worker. And I guess I was there about a year before I was allowed to attend his classes. And he held writing classes for those in treatment who earned the right to attend them. Now, I had been writing, I had already had a couple of poems published in the 80s. I've been writing all my life. That was, you know, I returned to that when there were problems at home or I was upset or things didn't go the way I wanted them to go. I would turn to that. And at first just as a diary comfort sort of a thing, and then as I learned a little bit about poetry, more and more the craft and the power of it drew me. And I had been taking workshops and studying from the let's say the late 70s, when the drugs really started to consume my life. That dropped away. I had done some writing, but it wasn't worth keeping.
Right.
And when things really got crazy, that was the last thing on my mind. You know, when you're an addict, the next $5 is what you're interested in. Not, you know, you don't care if you could write Shakespeare. You don't want it. You want the next $5. $10 actually was for my drug of choice. I needed the 10, but whatever. And the idea of writing stone cold sober, I didn't even have any concept of that. Because, you know, I'd always been whatever, a drinker, you smoke a little weed, whatever. It was second nature. It wasn't something I thought about. And now here I would be confronted with this blank page, and it's just me. And Howard was really, he took us by the hand and led us in a very small group. There were only 5 or 6 of us in the group, in a non-threatening way, to be able to write about some very threatening things. And he was very appreciative and very generous and warm and inspiring in the workshops. And he would read his own poems, and he's like this beat poet, big old gray mustache, and he'd be snapping his fingers while he was reading his poems. And it was just really coming out of this world of cops, robbers, and dope fiends. It was fabulous to have that, and I've been going ever since.
Well, speaking of cops, robbers, and dope fiends.
What a lead-in, right?
Exactly. And you recently edited a book.
Put it together.
By and about the police.
Right.
The book is called Off the Cuffs.
Yep. Published by Soft Skull Press. Just came out this year.
Okay. And, okay. By and about the police, are you presenting the heroes? Are you presenting the brutality? What do you...
All of them. The book is in 5 sections. It's eyewitnesses, victims and perpetrators, dreamers, and insiders are the sections. Eyewitnesses can be any perspective, any direction. It's just something that a person recounting a personal experience that involved the police in whatever aspect. The victims and perpetrators, which really those 2 sections make up the heart of the book, those terms are used in a non-traditional way. It's how the cops are the victims of their job and how the cops can be perpetrators within the context of their job, which is kind of turning it around from the way those words are generally used in cop parlance. You know, the victim is the victim of the crime, the perpetrator is the person who perpetrated the crime, but the cops are some separate entity. And I really tried to look at how they're right in the middle of that mix because of my background.
Right.
Because if I've been in the middle of it, my ex-husband was a felon, he was in and out of jail. I've really...
what better person to put this
really
together?
felt both sides of it. And, you know, I have tremendous respect and tremendous anger. I feel both toward the police. I've seen them be absolute heroes in their role. I had some anonymous cops whose names I still don't know totally saved my life toward the end of my active addiction, doing an action they absolutely did not have to do and were not going to get any, you know, thanks for doing from their department or from me. And I've seen cops and experienced police brutality firsthand. So I wanted to present... I really get sick of that one-note joke. Whether, you know, it's really common in New York that, you know, oh, every cop is a brute. Every cop, you know, they're all liars and they're all out to get you, and you never, you know, that's one attitude. And then the other attitude is that they can do no wrong, and if the cop said it was this way, this is how it was, and we can't even question it. And where's the whole middle ground where the truth lies? We don't get
there's a lot
that.
of gray.
Or you don't get it in one place. And that's what I wanted this book to do. I wanted to let the voices speak to each other from both sides or every side of that continuum, because it's not 2 sides, it's a circle. And there's, you know, there are perspectives and attitudes and actions inhabiting every dot on that circle. So hopefully I've captured a good sampling of them here.
Well, would you like to give us an example of something that's in the book?
I would love to. And a really interesting part of this process for me is that I've become friends with some police officers, some of the police poets that are in this book. And it's really interesting for me today to have cop friends that have nothing to do with my dad, that are like here and now, that are today,
Right.
It's been a wonderful process. So I'd like to read a poem by a police officer. Her name is Sarah Cortez, and she's a patrol officer in Houston, Texas. She's Mexican-American. She's a fabulous writer. She has a book out of her own poems entitled How to Undress a Cop, which is how she first came to my attention. And this poem's entitled Lingo. This is how it goes when you're dating a cop. You say, "Will you be home for dinner?" He says, "Negative." You say, "Do you like this dress?" He says, "It's a good visual." Face to face is a meeting, not a kiss or a snuggle. Fuck you means hello. To dust is to kill. On Valentine's, when I say my bra size is 34B, saying the B twice so the embarrassing D cup won't be purchased, he says, "Oh yeah, 34 Bravo." I smile, hoping he'll find a color lace I don't already have under my own police uniform. What isn't said is, "I love you. Don't get shot tonight on shift by a cop hater. Don't die before I die, alone, in an alleyway or on a bright street in widening pools of blood."
That's powerful.
It's an amazing poem, the turn that it takes from that jocularity of this is the banter, this is the lingo, this is how we talk and joke and bring our profession into our intimate life, into what's really happening underneath that and what are the real risks of the job and of loving someone in that job. It's huge. And the fact that they don't say it and that she needs to say it in the poem is huge.
And as you said, there's more than one perspective within the book. And we have about 4 minutes left. If you'd like to give us another example of a different perspective within there.
Sure. This is was written by John Gray. He's a financial systems analyst. It's called Stopped by Cops. You hate being stopped by cops. You know you've been speeding, but don't feel as if you've done something wrong. You detest the way they make you sit and wait while their lights blaze in front of you. Compared to that swirling red, your headlights are weak and vulnerable. There's nothing more devastating in your mind than when the cop hovers over you, asks for identification. All of you is squeezed into a tiny license, a pathetic registration, while he is everything else. The darkness, the mountains, the forbidding shoreline. The ones you rush away from or hurtle towards would never stop you here. You were over the limit, is what he's saying. What he means is, your life is not your own. Well, that doesn't speak directly to brutality. I think it speaks directly to the heart of the difficulty in the relationship. Because it almost doesn't matter what the cop is saying or doing. What he has is absolute power, and you know it in that moment, and that's what you respond from. So
was this your first published?
This is my second
form?
book. My first book came out a year ago. It's called The Memory Factory, and it's a collection of all my poems.
Okay, so that one is exclusively your work.
That's all mine, yeah. A lot of it deals with my time in the streets. And
so just a bit of a history there. And you're also a webmaster.
Oh, yes. Poets.com, Poetz.com. It's poetry and activist web links. If anyone wants to know more about it, check out the site, or you can email me. I'm Jackie@Poetz.com.
Okay, and we do have we'll have the website up during the closing credits, so that information will be up there and available.
Great,
and
visit.
there'll be a link on our website, which is www.talkingabout.info also. And in putting this together, do you also work in any other collaborative efforts?
Yeah, I work with a band. I work with another poet, Vicki Hudspeth, and a band. We do spoken word performances all around New York City. There's information about that on the website as well. It's really wonderful collaborating with musicians. It just brings a whole other dimension to the work that isn't there when you just do a straight reading, even though those are fun.
Just to create sort of an atmosphere, or?
Well, you know, we all get to live out our rock star dreams, and who didn't have them? Every kid in Brooklyn growing up had them. You wanted to be a race car driver or a rock star. Fast cars scare me.
Okay. Too much fast living, or?
Maybe not.
Well, so what's next on your agenda?
Well, what I'm working on now is actually a piece for theater. I'm trying to put together a one-woman show. I'm not sure how that's going to develop because I'm still learning about the process. I know about poetry and I know about putting books together, and I'm taking baby steps learning on how to put something together for the stage specifically. It's been fascinating doing the writing for that, though.
Okay, can you give us a little glimmer of what might be on the horizon with that?
No.
No?
No. You know, it's tricky talking about a writing project when you're in the middle of working on it. I've learned that if I do that to a certain level, some of the writing doesn't happen. And especially with this, where I'm kind of, I wouldn't say I'm on shaky ground, but it's new territory for me. And I think the creative process, it's a beautiful one, and it's one that we really can rely on. It's always there, but it needs to be treated with great tenderness. It's a relationship you've got to nurture, you and your creative spirit. So that's what I'm doing. This is kind of like the internal portion, and then hopefully when it's all done, the external, I will take it out on the stage, and it will be wild. It will be in everybody's face.
So I guess through everything you've been through in your life leading up to this point, is that what gave you the ability to nurture such a project?
I think that's what's shown me the necessity of it. I mean, I don't know about the ability. I mean, I think we come here with abilities, but we make the choices on where we're going to spend our energy and how we're going to discipline ourselves. And it's those choices that are key. I've certainly learned from my life what is important for me as a spiritual being, as a productive being, as a creative being,
right.
And I've learned to make the necessary trade-offs.
And that is a good point to wrap this up. And I thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
And I hope that you'll join us again next time. Again, our website is www.talkingabout.info. Jackie's website is poets.com, and we will see you next time. Bye.